prices are on track for their sixth weekly gain despite OPEC Plus's agreement last night to boost output. And we're joined by CEO and head of oil research at C Markets, Dr. Youssef M. Shamadi. Thanks so much for joining us today, Youssef. Now, OPEC will boost supply modestly, 640,000 barrels, up from the current increase of 432,000. Why haven't markets responded? Why is the price still going up? Are there doubts that the cartel can actually deliver on these output increase promises?
Hello, Ramya, and thanks a lot for having me. Well, the incremental that we have seen yesterday, actually, it is a response to things that are emerging events in the markets that haven't since the beginning of 2022. First, perhaps most analysts agree that the market has been in a shortage, and inventories in the US and other countries have been on decline. Of course, prices have been rising due to the geopolitical situations in Ukraine and other parts of the world. So to me, that the alliance has kept a cautious policy since the beginning of 2022 is due to let's say, the continued impact of COVID-19, especially in China. But now China is expected to come back again, and given the possibility that Russia might lose a big chunk of its oil, given the partial EU ban on Russian oil imports. So I think yesterday's decision just reflects a response to these two important geopolitical, let's say, events. Number one, the loss of Russian oil, and number two, the return of Chinese economy, especially in China. Of course, one thing here is that prices have not reacted in the way that many analysts would expect. And one major reason is the quantity announced by the organization perhaps may not be large enough. And the reason, if we want to justify that, just look at the 2 days before the agreement, prices have been on decline. But once the quantity has been announced, then certainly the market have priced in that this quantity is not sufficient. That's the first reason. The second reason is that the share of that incremental output is equally distributed among all members. And we all know that many of the members, including Angola, Nigeria, Russia, and others, are already lagging behind their delivery. So it is actually only Saudi Arabia and UAE, pretty much. Of course, we can also include Kuwait and Iraq, which are really capable of increasing their output. So I believe even the market doesn't believe that 648,000 will actually be delivered, because there is already about 50% lagging in the previous months.
So there are doubts that the cartel can make up for that deficit. And why do you think OPEC didn't exempt Russia from the target agreement? I mean, wouldn't it be in the best interest of Saudi Arabia, the UAE, and others to perhaps boost production to compensate for any lack of Russian oil?
At this stage, I don't think so. It is in the interest to exempt Russia, and because agreement was established in 2016, but the recent agreement was established in 2020, and it has been an important member of that collaboration. If you look at the baselines between Saudi Arabia and Russia, it's almost equal. It's just equal. They have the same quota. And they exempt Russia at this stage, it would just mean that Russia is a less important member to the alliance. You have seen that there has been a recent, just before the meeting, there has been a visit of the Russian foreign minister to Saudi Arabia. And I believe one major topic on the agenda was the OPEC Plus meeting. So I think at this stage, it's not in the interest of OPEC Plus countries to exempt Russia for that particular reason. Certainly, over the 2 months and the second reading, they have kind of advanced the date on which this agreement will expire. So I think it is after the 2 months, let's say end of August, when we perhaps see a new agreement, then perhaps we can see change of baselines of various producers, and that can include perhaps changing the Russia, taking into account the current situation that they have, including the political sanctions and financial sanctions that they are experiencing.
So we will have to wait to September to see how the Russian situation materializes. And the U.S. has really welcomed this output boost, however modest it was. To what extent was OPEC, and particularly Saudi, under diplomatic pressure to really boost output?
Well, already there has been a response from Saudi Arabia on increasing the output, and that's what we saw yesterday. Of course, we have seen some comments coming from the U.S. White House, and believe there's also some news coming out that there is a possibility of a meeting between the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia and the U.S. President later. So I think perhaps the two countries are coming in line together in terms of the need to increase output and the fact that the market is really in shortage. So I believe in my view, I think end of August, perhaps we're going to see a higher output, especially coming from Saudi Arabia and UAE, provided that the two countries, Saudi Arabia and the US, are in agreement on various issues.
Now, this latest output increase is actually less than 0.4% of global demand, and some analysts anticipate prices to reach above $120. What is your forecast for prices?
Well, at this stage, I still think in the summer, we're going to see high prices. Perhaps we can see, we are not very far from 120, but perhaps we can even go further. Perhaps we can reach 125 or slightly higher in the midsummer. That's because of the demand and the driving season. But certainly, I think after the summer season, perhaps prices can retrieve a little bit for two important reasons. Here is that the demand can come down, and we can see a higher output coming from OPEC Plus. One thing here is that the loss of Russian oil and is not expected to be that significant in my view, and because I believe that oil banned in Europe can just find alternative ways to India and China. So that's perhaps one major reason. Another reason why Russia was not exempt at this stage, but there's another possibility that Russia can reduce its output, as we heard from some CEOs of some oil companies in Russia. So I think if that happens, we can really be in a scenario where we have really a major shortage in the market if Russia decides unilaterally to cut its production.
So you predict demand coming down despite China coming back online?
Yeah, certainly in the summer, China is coming back, but towards the end of the year, I think we're going to see lower prices because certainly demand is expected to come down, and we can see a higher production coming up. Also, if you look at one thing here, I would also to mention is that the increase in oil prices or even the reduction in oil prices may not necessarily be reflected on fuel prices. And that's because the US already suffers from something like 1.2 million barrels a day of refining capacity being lost over the past 5 years. So this is a major reason fuel prices in the US are still high. If OPEC Plus decides to increase its production in order to lower oil prices, there also needs to be more that's coming from refining capacity, especially in the US and other countries. And this is the most, or let's say it would be the most important factor in lowering oil and fuel prices in 2022.
Thanks so much for your insights today. Thanks for joining us.
Always a pleasure.